Let me tell you something from lived experience. I served in the Marine Corps, combat Marine in Vietnam. I fought in Vietnam as a combat Marine. And before all of that, I was a top flight amateur boxer, surrounded by some of the most hyper-masculine men you can imagine. So I know the culture of toughness. I know the swagger. I know the posturing. I know the silent codes men live by. But after studying Wilhelm Reich and character armoring, I also learned something else. A lot of what we call masculinity in America isn't strength at all. It's armor. It's fear wrapped in aggression. It's emotional paralysis disguised as dominance. Today, I'm going to break down toxic and hyper-masculinity through Reichian analysis and explain how men build armor that protects them, but eventually destroys them. Most people think what toxic masculinity really is, not what many people think. Most people get it wrong. Toxic masculinity isn't about being strong or brave or aggressive when necessary. It's about this: a man so armored, so emotionally frozen that he can only express power through domination, violence, denial, and control. Reich would call this muscular armoring, which is body tension, rigidity, the inability to relax. Emotional armoring, blocking feelings, character armoring, fixed, rigid personality patterns. In toxic masculinity, all three fuse together. My experience, Marines, boxing, and the cult of toughness. When you're in the Marines, especially in combat, you learn quickly that emotion is a liability. Fear, push it down. Sadness, never show it. Regret, don't even whisper it. As a boxer, same thing. Pain doesn't exist. You keep your chin down, your guard up, and your emotions locked away. Men are trained, whether consciously or not, to make armor out of their entire identity. Reich would say the body becomes the fortress in which the man hides from himself. And that fortress is everywhere in masculine culture. The stiff jaw, the puffed chest, the swagger, the refusal to feel, the contempt for vulnerability. These aren't signs of confidence, they're signs of armoring. The Reichian theory on how armoring creates the hyper-masculine man. Reich believed men block their emotional energy to avoid feeling their deepest fears. Fear of weakness, fear of rejection, fear of humiliation, fear of dependency, fear of intimacy, fear of their own inner chaos. When that energy has nowhere to go, it becomes rage, control, domination, grandiosity, compulsive aggression. This is why toxic masculinity feels powerful, but it's actually frozen power, locked behind layers of fear. Reich described this as emotional strangulation combined with muscular rigidity. Why hypermasculine men fear vulnerability. Hypermasculine men often say, I don't do feelings. I don't need help. I handle things myself. I'm the man in control. But the truth is, they're terrified to open even a small crack in their armor. Because if they ever allow themselves to feel sadness, grief, fear, shame, loneliness, abandonment, their entire sense of identity would collapse. Reich says the armored man is holding himself together, and if he relaxes, the grief underneath could overwhelm him. So instead of healing, he builds more armor, more tough talk, more aggression, more emotional suppression, more alpha male performance, more bullying. This isn't strength, it's emotional constipation. Toxic masculinity as a social defense system. Toxic masculinity doesn't just come from individuals, it comes from culture, military systems, sports, patriarchal expectations, fathers who armored themselves, religious environments, peer pressure. Men learn early. Be a man. Don't cry. Shake it off. Man up. Stop being soft. So they armor up. And once armored, they can't feel deeply. And if you can't feel deeply, you can't empathize. You can't connect. You can't love without fear. Instead, you turn to violence, control, dominance, suppression of others. Reich would say armored men create armored societies. The cost of hyper-masculinity. Men pay for their armor with their lives. High suicide rates, relationship failure, domestic violence, emotional numbness, addictions, loneliness, lack of intimacy, explosive anger, trauma that never heals. The armor becomes the coffin. And the saddest part, men think the armor is their masculinity. What real strength looks like. Reich believed in unarmored masculinity, which means feeling without collapsing, loving without fear, assertiveness without domination, courage without denial, sexuality without shame, anger without violence, responsibility without ego. Unarmored masculinity is flexible, grounded, present, connected, and authentic. The opposite of toxic masculinity. Reich said, the natural man is never afraid of his feelings. That's real masculinity, not the cartoon version. My lived perspective. After a lifetime around hyper-masculine men, Marines, fighters, veterans, tough guys, I understand how this armor is built. I also know how much pain it hides. And that's why I talk about this. Not to shame men, but to free them. Because the armor that protects you at 18 is the same armor that suffocates you at 50, 60, 70, or 80. I've lived long enough to see it. Reichian psychology gave me the language for what I intuitively witnessed my whole life. Men don't need more toughness. They need permission to feel. Because when the armor finally cracks, and it always does, the man underneath deserves to breathe.